Last year around this time, Frostlass was getting the axe, even though nobody was complaining about it. This year, Jirachi is finally on the table for discussion, not even getting suspect tested yet. And people are posting in support of it, and I just don't know anymore. Now, obviously, banning Frostlass and Jirachi is night and day, because if you ban Frostlass, then nothing really changes. And if you ban Jirachi, you know that it's a key part of the metagame. It has impact. So you might find yourself saying, oh, well, how am I going to deal with Latias, for example, without Jirachi around? Maybe we have to look at Latias. That's what's being proposed right now. Not just Jirachi, the end, but Jirachi, and maybe we got to look at some other stuff, perhaps simultaneously, perhaps afterwards. Like if Jirachi were to get banned, do we just immediately ban Latias afterwards, for example? So there's a lot going on, and we are going to breeze through it today. So I have linked this thread in the pinned comment for your reading pleasure, so you can follow along in another tab. So let me just get through this quickly before I throw the replay back on there. So I am assuming that anyone familiar with DPP at all knows why Jirachi needs to be banned. It's one of the most hated Pokemon ever, and for very good reason. It has made a reputation over the past not just ever since Platinum came out and it got Ironhead, but ever since it really started incorporating Body Slam into its moveset. It suddenly has decided that Body Slam and Ironhead counters everything, which is, well, we'll get to why that's bad in case it's not obvious. And I do want to make a video dedicated to the history of Jirachi's evolution in DPP, because there's too much to get into here. But yeah, to see how we got to this point specifically. So in this video, I will simply allude to it, because I made a post in this thread. Maybe I made two, I don't know. And yeah, so, and of course, more recently, people are more and more irritated with Fire Punch. Inspired perhaps by Advance, where Jirachi doesn't have Iron Head, but just spams Fire and Ice Punch nonstop and, lucks its way through everything. You got Ice Punch crit freezing its way through Swamperts. I get the crit doesn't have anything to do with it, but yeah, so just the freeze part is relevant. Or just spamming Fire Punch, because knowing if there's not a Charizard or Moltres on the other team, something's going to get burned, and nothing likes getting burned. That's why Gengar's Will-O-Wisp is so spammable. Except, unlike Gengar's Will-O-Wisp, if you... Obviously, yes, you can't command the burn as instantly as Guard's Wisp, but Jirachi's Fire Punch is also doing damage no matter what. And it is not as easy to forcibly remove Jirachi when you're switching into the Fire Punch. Like with Gengar Wisp, you go into your Pursuit T-Tar and suddenly Gengar's in trouble. Whereas with Jirachi, yeah, it always fears Dugtrio, but Dugtrio doesn't want to switch in, and nothing else really does. So you kind of have to sit on it. And you're thinking, Kev, why are you going over Advanced Jirachi? Specifically because the dynamic there is the same as in DPP. The things that you use to threaten Jirachi, by and large, don't really switch into Fire Punch safely. So whenever you spam Fire Punch, which is a good move that you want to be spamming in general, then you have a very good chance of ruining even your answers. Since 20%, you say, oh, it's not that much, and anyone who's ever actually played Pokemon knows how much that is. It's a T-Tar Crunch drop if you want to just take the Jirachi out of it. So... obviously you can't play super afraid of percentages all the time, but seeing as Jirachi gets so many opportunities, the percentages go up, and you just spam Fire Punch very safely and ruin a lot of what's going to come in. So you either have to have a very, very, very specific answer, or you just have to kind of sit on it and also get lucky. Because at least with Advanced Jirachi, you can shrug off the status, but even if you go to something like, I don't know, Defensive Rest Hog Rotom, and you get burned, well, suddenly it's only a few Ironhead flinches away, burn and sand, of putting you away. It's not just like, oh, I got burned, but now I can rest it off. No, now I got burned, and that burn is going to make it easier for it to Ironhead me to death. So that is an exacerbated issue of something that already exists in Advance. You say, oh, well, what about Heatran? Well, Heatran is not something... You can't use Heatran all the time for many reasons that we'll get into. So the only Pokemon that really safely switch into Fire Punch Jirachi are Leftovers Heatran, And Bolt Clefable is also very good because it's not afraid of passive damage, and Iron has something like a 6-hit KO. But even still, it's risky. It's more about the fact that it doesn't fear the burn at all. Infernape is not a reliable switch-in, because Body Slam and goodbye. So that besides Jirachi, there's also the potential looking at Latias, which some players have exhibited concern with Latias, even with Jirachi in the tier, kind of mostly in the sense of the warping effect that the defensive Thunder Wave set has, and how it shuts down so much offense so effortlessly. And Thunder Wave being silly. Now, I'm never going to say that paralysis isn't a ridiculous status, but and I get that we can't remove paralysis because precedent or something stupid like that. But yeah, I understand that. Even though before Latias was around, a lot of people were complaining that offense is too good. So I think Latias shutting down a lot of offense and demanding that it execute at a higher level rather than just be spammed to success, I think that's a good thing. But, I'm open to that. Clefable, I personally don't think Clefable needs to be answered at all. Similarly to Latias, before Clef really popped up, then people were complaining about hazards all the time. And paralysis for that matter, because in Gen 4, Magic Guard means you can't get full parried. They changed that in Gen 5. And Clefable helps so much against these. And yes, knockoff is silly. Some people say, oh, well, maybe knockoff's broken. Kind of sympathetic to it. But at the same time, I don't know. If there is an issue with Clefable, and I'm still not convinced that there is, that it is a more an amazing partner to Jirachi, like too good. That knockoff removing leftovers makes it too easy for Jirachi to Ironhead flinch its way through. I should say at this point, by the way, even if nothing changes, I think DPP is a great metagame and I will be content with it. However, the thrust of where I'm coming from, which is where some players and I fundamentally disagree, is that I don't think we should be afraid of change and we should try to make the game better if it is being played actively, and I don't like when, not that this is necessarily happening, but sometimes whispers like this happen, like, oh, if DPP changes, you saw it a lot around changes in Gen 5, like, oh, if we ban this, I won't play Gen 5 anymore, and I don't like when people try to take the tier hostage. We're trying to improve it, but I won't. People do it in tournaments too. Oh, well, if this tournament thing goes through, then I will not play anymore, and then suddenly everyone freaks out and goes, no, we can't have that guy leave, no, so... Yeah, I'm very tired of these arguments because, as you can imagine. But, point being, Jirachi and Clef make a very good pairing together. They enable each other, mostly Clef enabling Jirachi. Things like, Heatran has to blow up to beat Clef, and then, Jirachi, if it blows up on Clef, then Jirachi is going to be much easier to deal with. Much harder to deal with, because there goes your main Jirachi answer. And if you... but the same thing goes for Latias, or even before that, Tyranitar, so... But obviously those get ruined by status, so... But there are ways around it. This is what I mean by demanding offense to execute at a high level. I think that Clefable shutting down Heatran's status and forcing a lot of sets to explode is a good thing. So... The thing is that it's difficult for Heatran to both take on Jirachi, because that requires leftovers if you want to do it reliably, and to make its way through Clef. Because even like a taunt Heatran will get knocked off, and then in the process, and then have fun. And the issue isn't just, without leftovers, Heatran will get flinched down, although it is, which already is, a warning sign, right? But the fact is, and I used to do this all the time, I don't know... A lot of people suddenly seem to be under the laboring under the delusion. I think it's a delusion anyway, so I probably shouldn't phrase it like that. But they have the idea that lefties Heatran and no backup with lefties suddenly means you're fighting against Jirachi. And there were years where I had a stall team where I would just get up hazards and I didn't even need to flinch the Heatran at all. I would just switch out of it and let it get worn down by spikes, or provoke it to blow up early. It doesn't even matter. It's just getting worn down, and then Jirachi makes its way through everything because Jirachi matches up incredibly well one-on-one against most offensive Pokemon while also being an offensive threat itself. It's not just about the defensive Wish Protect sets. So, and I think, yeah. Well, there are a lot of perspectives. I don't want to be too reductive. But yeah, that's something I think. So yeah, Machamp. I made a video on Machamp like 6 months ago or something. I forget how long it was exactly. You can go look that up. I won't repeat it here. But yeah, I'm glad that Machamp is still on the table because that was shut down, sadly. Sleep is also being looked at. Now, I'm good with that. I mean, I don't feel particularly strongly about it, but I do feel that Sleep is generally a stupid status. The idea, without Jirachi and Latias, Sleep it would be difficult to handle. I think it's pretty difficult to handle as is. Rest Talk Jirachi is the only really good Sleep Absorber. That's an incredibly limited set, number one. I love Lum Jirachi, but it is not, a sleep counter. And Latias is about the worst sleep counter in the world, because Sleep Talk Latias is even easier to pursuit than usual, so... Yeah, okay, so now we're getting into the counter arguments. So, this is about, it's a Pokemon that teaches new players the value of probability management. This is true. And for years, I have been, let's go back to that high standard, let's say, I have, of what makes a team acceptable into Jirachi. Like Leftovers, Heatran, other similar tactics, which can be ruined by Fire Punch, but whatever. But the whole point is that, yes, and some other players have said this too, so the whole point is that if you build your team well, then you reduce the need for, the likelihood Jirachi is going to Ironhead you, right? It's kind of like the Rock Slide that T-Tar and Arrow have in Advance, and for similar demands on the team builder. It's like, if you really get Rock Slide flinched out regularly, so you're doing something wrong with your team. I even made a video called, the importance of good steel resistant DPP or something like that, because a lot of the teams that are frail into Jirachi's Ironhead, they're also frail into Metagross's Meteor Mash, Agiligros, Scarfgross, Trick Room Bronzong's Gyro Ball, SD Scissor's Bullet Punch even. So, yeah, you will generally get messed up if you've got, Leftovers Heatran plus Scarf Rotom, Infernape, Lefties less Jirachi, stuff like that. At the same time, just because I do think it's a good thing that it forces you to respect it in this way, Jirachi, the Ironhead part. That it forces you to not just go gung-ho. But at the same time, I don't think the tier is so runaway powerful offensively that it needs this limitation, especially when it's in the hands of RNG. I don't think that it's okay that, Heatran can get flinched out so easily. So, yeah, I do agree that it's good, but I responded to this post, actually. Yeah, Oatmon here makes the argument that if you switch Jirachi into Fire Punch and you get burned... So, Swampert counters Jirachi, right? But if you get burned by Fire Punch, it doesn't actually... Why is this so loud? Good lord. I'm using Insane in the Rain music, by the way, because he's great. Yeah, if Swampert counters Jirachi, but it switches into Fire Punch and loses, then it is no longer a counter, right? Okay, absolutely. But this reminds me of Scald arguments, because, well, if you can't switch so many Pokemon into Scald because they get ruined by a burn, what are you left to actually switch into? So with Jirachi, it's even worse. Because, again, as I mentioned, Heatran, Clef, what else is switching into Fire Punch reliably? I should say Fire Punch plus Body Slam, obviously, because you could say, well, Leftovers Infernape with Slack Off, which, yeah, have fun countering Jirachi with that. So, not that it's a bad Pokemon, but you get the point. And no, Lumberries don't really get that's the whole point. As soon as you guard yourself against the status of Jirachi, you make yourself more vulnerable with Lumberry, then you make yourself more vulnerable to the Ironhead flinching. So, yeah, I mean, Swampert, Defensive Empoleon, Powdon, for God's sake, Bulky Quagsire, Gliscor, all these super bulky physical Pokemon, Rest Hog Rotom, you just switch and get burned. A lot of them, they just get burned and they're ruined, period. And it's not as easy as slapping Heal Bell on your team, or, even pulling it off. Especially because, once Jirachi gets going, especially because it's got a lot of Ironhead PP. But yeah, it's like, well, what are you actually switching in at this point if you can't switch to Swampert? So if you have a counter that can't actually switch in, you don't have a counter, and then that leaves you with very few actual switch-ins to Jirachi. And that's just on top of the whole paraflinching Ironhead thing. So then there's some more stuff about Machamp, which I hope the Machamp thing goes somewhere. I thought the arguments against Machamp were very bad. And a lot of the Jirachi arguments, remind me of it. So here's ABR, Salty French Guy, Laurel, testing good, in favor, blah, 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 blah. Thanks, guys. I mean that seriously. Here's stories saying something, like something like physically defensive Zapdos or Milotic. Those are very good examples. Pokemon that do lose to to Jirachi in Sand when they get flinched out. And so here's a post I responded to in detail, so I'll let you read it. But yeah, this idea, I think this is kind of going into theoretical land where Jirachi gatekeeps cheesy strategies. I mean, the cheesiest strategy of all in DPP is paralysis spam, where you just paralyze everything and then Jirachi Machamp your way through. And nothing's cheesier than that. And that is enabled by Jirachi. Paraspam teams without Jirachi are not bad, but they're a lot easier to deal with. So, yeah, and of course Machamp is the issue, primarily. So, other cheesy things, like this is what I mean by historically I want to go over what Jirachi did. And I even went through it in the post, so rather than repeat myself multiple times, then I'll just make it through that DBC's post. I mean, he said a lot of what I agree with. So, yeah. Jirachi's negative influence, the nice parts about Jirachi don't really help. Or don't really, make up for the fact that it is such a negative influence overall. Personally, by the way, I have been a big advocate of just banning Ironhead outright, or banning 20% flinch moves and higher. So Waterfall, because people also complain about Waterfall. And anyone who goes, oh no, Gyarados is Aqua Tail, the replacement is 90% accuracy, that is not an argument. I think that is self-evident. So, yeah, we're in this age now where we entertain all these these obviously stupid bad faith arguments who just go like, you'll say the sky is blue and some jackass will go, can I get a source on that? Like, give me a fucking break. Kind of tangential, but it kind of reminds me of something regarding this debate where suddenly I don't understand why. Well, okay, I have my theories, but I won't get into them because they're unsubstantiated, largely. Yeah, we're suddenly, like, this post of XCal saying, well, Jirachi doesn't actually flinch out entirely. It's like, yes, it does, man. Come on, you know this. And this is why the debate is so exhausting to me. We're pretending like Jirachi doesn't flinch out entire teams. And I had an argument with XCal about this on Discord, which got pretty heated. I appreciated his point that, yes, if you build your team to be Ironhead resilient, then yes, you will get flinched out less. That doesn't mean it doesn't still happen, as seen in this amazing replay. Yes, and I know it's unlikely, by the way. That's the whole thing. Where DBC has a couple of replays of Jirachi beating things that has no business beating, like Impish Gyarados, Flinch and Hippo and Clef, Jirachi doing Jirachi things. This is the only one I'm really interested in showing you here. And yes, it's completely ridiculous. I think the Magnus had a minus defense nature or something because it wanted to take Draco Meteors and it wanted to explode. And it's like, well, I'm flinching, whatchamacallit. I'm flinching Magnezone out anyway, so... I have lefties for Jirachi Ironhead anyway. But yeah, so here comes Magnezone. By the way, Jirachi just casually going for Ironhead flinches on Blissey because, of course, it's the best move. It's very Machamp-like in that it winds up always being the best move. I think it's Scarf. It's locked in. It doesn't have any better moves. So yeah, it's getting lucky with crits and whatnot. But this replay also illustrates something awesome, which is that, see, there on that turn, Magnezone doesn't flinch, and it doesn't necessarily help. Because the problem with Jirachi is that even if you get, with leftover sets, it Ironhead flinches itself back to high health. And then even if you do not get flinch on a crucial turn, not getting flinched once is not necessarily enough to beat it. Because Jirachi is also a very difficult Pokemon to take out. So, yeah, here you see a leftovers Magnezone getting flinched out, which is just awesome. And it still has plenty of Ironheads left after, too. Or not plenty, but, there goes the Magnezone. Anyway... So I'm not saying this happens on a game-to-game basis. The point is that Jirachi enables stupid stuff like that to happen. It is the exact same problem as Machamp, where you'll face a fighting resist, and the best move, no matter what, is just to click Dynamic Punch because you'll confuse them and maybe might get bailed out. Jirachi Iron has the exact same thing. And having this dynamic undercuts the whole point of trying to be competitive, which is that you want to minimize the number of strategies like this where a worse player can just click things and make their way to a win against a better player, because the better player couldn't do anything but just pray. It's kind of like a baton pass in this sense, where that's why we remove these things. And it's not about, oh, well, Jirachi's not actually that likely, you know. Like, yes, we know the odds of Jirachi chaining together 16 flinches aren't actually that good, but, you know, then you see these other factors that link into it. And you see why that isn't actually a counter argument. And also, it regularly does, is the thing. And even if the odds aren't that good or whatever, it still encourages this kind of play. And obviously you can say, well, you can always go for hacks and pray for it. You can say, you know what, I have one turn, I'm going to use it going for an Ice Beam Freeze, and I hope I get bailed. Yes, Pokemon does do that, but an Ice Beam Freeze is a lot less likely than Jirachi Ironhead, obviously. And it is a lot likelier that your bad play is going to get rewarded if you go for a crit on one turn, or if you go for an Ice Beam Freeze, than it is if you have Jirachi against Heatran and just for funsies you decide to start Ironheading. You know, I've seen that so many times in tournaments where this is a real thing that happens. Heatran against Jirachi. The Jirachi team has like 4 Heatran counters: T-Tar, Starmie, Swampert. Okay, 3, whatever. And the Jirachi is like, you know what? I'm just gonna para-flinch this thing down because I don't know why. Because, by the way, if anyone says, well, you know, what if they can't switch into Heatran? If you can't switch into Heatran, that is a major skill issue. Also, they could. That's the whole point. But if your counter to Heatran is flinching it out with Jirachi because you can't switch into it, then your team is very, very, very flawed. And that's not really a good excuse. So I only mention that because I did see that at some point. But yeah, it's not even about, oh, it's not that likely. It's the fact that people will go for this strategy, just like they will Dynamic Punch even resist with Machamp, and they will get rewarded disproportionately. You know, they should not be getting rewarded as much as they should. So yeah, and then there's the whole, oh, we don't have proof that the metagame will be better against Jirachi once Jirachi is banned, which there's never proof that a metagame is 100% better once something is banned. Yeah, I mentioned in my second post that we're getting to that when XYOU was very, very hated, not even Oris, XY, then the council wasn't doing anything, then they would basically give you the politician runaround, where it's like, well, prove that the metagame will be better without Aegislash, where there's never proof. That's why you have to try it, you know, and you can undo it. Now, the fears that if you don't undo you know, it might not do... Oh, Jesus Christ, that was bad, I'm sorry. If you ban Jirachi, you can't undo it if it's a mistake, and not trusting the system. I mean, the gripe is with the system at that point. And also, you know, there were citations of, oh, well, we didn't do it with Latias. Well, there wasn't a movement to re-ban Latias, so I don't know where this is coming from. Yeah, so Jirachi, blah, blah, blah. Hold a retest, but there won't be a retest. So personally, to me, this just feels like, you know, fuck you, I don't like change. You know, don't change the game on me. I want it the way it is. I'm comfortable and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, and I don't think that is, yeah. Osgood has some points against the Jirachi test. I don't find it overbearing. I mean, that I also sympathize with. Just like I sympathize with Excal's point about if you make your team Ironhead resilient, you're a lot less likely to get flinched out. Yeah, but it's limiting and it's going to, you know, threaten to do it anyway. But here, it's like, it's not overbearing, I agree, generally. I think DPP is a great metagame, as I said earlier, but I think we could make it better. And he goes on to say that paralysis is the real issue. I mean, no disagreements there. If you ask Kev, would you get rid of paralysis? It's gone, instantly. I don't think we need it at all. Now, actually, Male a few years ago, he proposed a para clause a la Sleep and Freeze. It's like, hey, you can't sleep more than one Pokemon, you can't freeze more than one Pokemon, can we do it with para? And then something about breaking game mechanics, and Sleep and Freeze clause are grandfathered in because they've been there from the very beginning in RBY. It's the worst kind of bureaucratic nonsense. Yeah, so... And then the arguments, they've adapted their team building, yes, but, that goes for every broken threat. So, anything else here? Long-term unintended consequences of the metagame we can't appreciate with just a suspect test. Yeah, but that's why, theoretically, if it's a mistake, then you wind up undoing the mistake. Again, citing Latias. The Latias suspect test... more problematic defensive T-Wave version. Yeah, but hasn't been any formal discussion, hey guys, should we do something about Latias? So, the point is well taken, of course, and it's well thought out, but, yeah, subsequent bans rather than bringing Jirachi back takes a long time, but yeah, basically, don't disturb the tier as it is. I understand that you can't really go wrong by keeping DPP as it is, but you also shut off the possibility of making it better. But yeah, there's no common consensus among its player base that anything's wrong with DPP. People have been complaining about Jirachi for how long? So yeah, rather than just rehash my entire post, the cheesy teams that Jirachi stood in the way of were Azelf lead offenses that a lot of balances at the time really struggled with. The DD, Onslaught, random offense, or not random, but, big guns like Subsplit Gar, Mixed D-Knight, even something like offensive Suicune, Jirachi does a good job. See, isn't that ridiculous that Jirachi is regularly, why does offensive Suicune get shut down so often? It's not because of grass types or Clefable or Latias, because it had these issues before, those Pokemon were popular. No, it's the fact that offensive Suicune gets flinched down by Jirachi in sand. It is absolutely ridiculous. A Pokemon of Suicune's bulk. Also, the fact that even if you don't flinch, then it's not like you're winning necessarily, which makes it even safer for Jirachi. It's nuts. Even if you're boosted. So, yeah. Now, the issue... something I really took issue with, because those teams were not cheesy, not overpowered, and you do not need Jirachi to keep them in check. It was just very good. So I don't really buy the argument that, Jirachi's keeping the fabric of our metagame from ripping apart, because then we'll get overrun by cheesy offense. That's as unsubstantiated as anything. Yeah, now this idea that Jirachi is the Stallbreaker, it kind of blows my mind for several reasons. Number one, I do not get the anti-Stall POV that people have. I don't think Stall is anywhere near overpowered. I think it's good. I think it makes a lot of demands of the player to beat, but that's a good thing. And the idea that it's difficult to, unreasonably difficult to answer, let's keep Jirachi around because it handles Stall. Are you really? Is Stall so broken that we need Jirachi? Jirachi's not even close to one of the best Stall breakers in the tier. If I'm making a team and I want to make sure I don't lose to Stall above all else, I am not starting it off with Jirachi. And it's not even a certain form of Jirachi. Yes, some Jirachis are good at dealing with Stall, or pretty good at dealing with Stall, but they're not the ones being cited here. These are the Jirachis that spam Fire Punch and Iron Head. This is what was being cited. The Stall-breaking tools are Body Slam and Fire Punch to take on Skarmory and Hippowdon. And then we discussed this later on Discord. It's think of these really good Stall teams. Bronzong, Skarm, Rotom, Clef, Gliscor, Latias. That entire team is physically defensive. Or, if Clef isn't physically defensive, then fine. But that entire team is very bulky, and it can't switch into Fire Punch, Iron Head, Jirachi. I guess if the Clef is physically defensive, then it can, but most of the time you want it to be specially defensive there, so point taken. So yeah, that entire team is bulky, let's say, and it can't handle a physical Jirachi? How does that not make the argument for you? Bronze, a physically defensive Skarm getting, spammed for burns, it's ridiculous that that's the case. And it's not even about, there's Gliscor being used there. Well, replace it with Hippowdon, and it's just as threatened by the Fire Punch. Good lord. So yeah, that's why I was so mind-blown that we currently are so afraid of Stall that we have to pray we hacks it with Jirachi, or else it'll overwhelm the entire tier. Also, this idea that Jirachi is keeping Clef in check really rubs me the wrong way, because it is not reliable at all. Knockoff ruins it. God forbid T-Wave. The fact that soft-boiled undoes its progress, and it's a lot harder to wear down than anything else. So, yeah. Stall becomes outrageously difficult to blah, blah, blah. I just said that again. Yeah. Here's another point that I wanted to make. A lot of stall teams are anchored by Jirachi. Remember how we said, Jirachi keeps those offense teams in check? Yeah, that's why a lot of stall teams use them. A lot of balance teams use it. But Jirachi is also a huge threat itself. So if you remove Jirachi from the tier, then you open up stall breaking options. Like, for example, Lucario has the capacity to threaten pretty much any stall team with right play and moveset and team support. But with Fire Punch Jirachi hanging around, it almost doesn't matter because it's going to keep it in check. Like, that's why we don't see Lucario anymore. It's not because it stopped. It just can't hang in the Jirachi as cleaner and check to everything era of the last 8 years pretty much. So yeah, you can't. You get rid of Jirachi and suddenly Lucario is opened up. Just as one example off the top of my head. So then the prove Jirachi is better. The post Jirachi metagame is better. Is not. I get that it's an old generation and their stability, but I think there's also, if we're going off of theory, I think there's also enough to demonstrate that the metagame is not going to be in complete disarray without Jirachi. So. If there's so little faith in the system to undo a potential misstep, then the system just needs to be changed. And yeah, there should be greater activity there as opposed to just saying no. The Jirachi's odds aren't that good. Like, come on, this we already talked about. I cannot believe this is an argument that is actually made. And player. And then there was like another post like. We were talking with Crystal on Discord. He's like, if Jirachi, if you have a team that's offensively strong enough and fast enough, then you don't have to go defensive to take on Jirachi. Which I agree. If you're running like Azelf DD spam, for example, then yeah, you're never switching out. So you don't have to sit on Jirachi because you're just trying to overwhelm it. But anything slower than that, I think it has been demonstrated how sub and protect offensive Jirachi, just because they're so fast, they will just completely ruin you. Your own Jirachi, if it's like Calm Mind or something, is not good into Fire Punch Jirachi. Or the fact that your Calm Mind Jirachi can get flinched out by Body Slam, Iron Head, defensive ones anyway. But yeah, you leave yourself vulnerable to that at all, and you will get punished for it. And that is too... The threshold Jirachi demands to be safe against it is too overbearing, too ridiculous. So, yeah. Now, Jirachi aside, I agree, get rid of Sleep because it's dumb, get rid of Machamp because it's dumb. My ideal ban package is not Jirachi necessarily. Well, okay, in my dream world, then it's get rid of 20% and higher flinch moves, because I agree. And another, because people also say, well, the argument made by Xcal was... Excuse me. The argument was that fucking stupid that I had to cough. No, I'm kidding. The argument was like, look, Jirachi is not that much worse, or it's about the same as Machamp Dynamic Punch and Gyarados Waterfall. And to that I say, yeah, get rid of Machamp Dynamic Punch. Get rid of Jirachi Iron Head. And for that matter, I don't think Gyarados Waterfall is that bad, but I recognize there are some people who see the 20% flinch rate and they decide, you know what? I fucking hate trying to outplay my opponent in a reliable fashion. I'm just going to pray. I'm going to cram together Thunder Waves. I'm going to click Waterfall against everything and hope it goes my way. Yes, I agree. That's fucking stupid. Then, therefore, get rid of Waterfall. Unfortunately, that was shut down by the bureaucratic higher-ups because precedent, I don't know. Ugh. It was a long, exhausting argument. But yeah, in my dream world, get rid of the 20% on higher flinch moves. I guess that means we lose Sky Attack Gliscor. I'm willing to sacrifice that. I guess we lose Zen Headbutt too. And I like Zen Headbutt Metagross, but again, worth it. 20% on higher flinch moves, Dynamic Punch as a whole, and Sleep moves. Then we get to keep Jirachi, keep Machamp, keep Gyarados, everything's fine. Now, in the more realistic world, I would say, okay, well, ban Jirachi, ban Machamp, which also has support for the same reasons it did before, because it's kind of like Frostlass, obviously more impactful. But, yeah, in the sense that Machamp is a lot less integral to the functioning of DPP defensively. It is more or less there to just kind of BS its way through things. And I won't rehash the arguments about, oh, Machamp's an important stall breaker. Well, no, it's not, number one. And number two, if our stall methods are just hoping for luck, then what's going on? And number three, they're more whatever. You can go back and check the arguments I made about Machamp in that video. They all still apply. So yeah, that's what I would like. Jirachi, Machamp, Sleep. That sounds great. I don't think we'll need to handle... I think Clef, even those people who dislike Clef, most of them I think would agree, without Jirachi, then Clef is not as unbearable. Because the issue with Clef, to them, again, I don't really have an issue with Clef. The issue with Clef for them is that... The issue with Clef for them is that it enables Jirachi too much. It's not just that it's too difficult to take out, but in that with knockoff and its resilience, then it facilitates an environment for Jirachi to Ironhead through things. So that I'm sympathetic to. So I don't, without Jirachi or Ironhead, then you don't have that anymore. Yeah, as for Latias, I think it's manageable, mostly because a lot of offense teams, they're not really dealing with Latias solely through Jirachi. I don't think Jirachi is... Let me rephrase that. I don't think Latias is problematic with or without Jirachi, but I'm sympathetic to it. So yeah, we can examine it. So, yeah. And I think that's basically it. Yeah, so here's removing Clef, Jirachi. That's basically it. Yeah, okay, so that's everything I wanted to say, more or less. So we will now finish off this replay that we started at the very beginning, because I know there are some of you who are like, well, where did this go? While I make my closing remarks, I suppose. So yeah, to reiterate, I think DPP is great the way it is, but I do think that it could be better. Oh yeah, getting rid of high flinch chance moves also removes anyone trying to nonsense their way through with Togekiss, because this is an important... this is important in general, because the whole reason we have clauses is to facilitate the better player winning. And if you think that, oh, you're trying to ban everything and just, deal with it, if that's your rationale, then you should have no issue with us just, letting loose and playing with everything. Dropping Ubers left and right. The whole reason we have the system is to facilitate the skill, the better player winning. Obviously, we will not be 100% successful. Yes, I know Pokemon is Pokemon, and there are crits and other stupid things that will also rob players of games regularly. Okay, I know that. And it's why I'm such an advocate for best of 3 and team tournaments and things like that. Double elimination. Because we have to compensate for these dumber aspects of our game. But just because we will not be 100% successful does not mean we don't try and make it better. And that's the same idea with Jirachi, and Ironhead. And Peng always says in our endless Gen 5 suspect discussions, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think that is very, very valid here. So, yeah. Now, God, what is going on here? This is a World Cup game from 2015, if you're wondering. Yeah, so I think that's all my points that have been that I've wanted to make. Yeah, and that's it. So for some reason I remember the Snorlax winning, but I guess I remembered it wrong. Yeah. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.